Welcome again to another episode of Connecting the Dots podcast with me, your host, Juliet. Today, I am joined by two amazing doctors who work at the African Centers for Technology Studies. And we will be touching on the fourth industrial revolution. Basically, we want to be redefining how we grow food, how we move food, and then also imagine development in the context of agriculture, food systems, and also the impact of climate change and the involvement of gender. In this episode, we are going to really explore how innovation and emerging technologies are being integrated into African food systems and rural livelihoods. And we reflect on what it takes to innovate in ways that are not only efficient, but also equitable. So, as said, I'm joined by Dr. Kingiri, who pursues interdisciplinary science and its integrated approaches to agriculture development and innovation with climate change and gender as cross-cutting themes. She's currently involved in research and advocacy, focusing on fourth industrial revolution with relevance to Africa and also the engagement or intersection of science and policy. Next to her is Catherine Kilelu, who is the Director of Communication, Outreach, and Partnerships at ACS. Her research interests are in agri-food system innovations and transition in Africa linked to sustainability, competitiveness, employment creation, and also resilient livelihoods on the circular bioeconomy. Dr. Kilelu has numerous publications related to these themes, and the same applies to Dr. Anne Kingiri. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
I don't know if both of you spoke to each other in terms of what to wear with the same color tops, or is it a new branding for Connecting the Dots?
This was a nice coincidence.
It's a coincidence.
It was a nice coincidence.
Nice coincidence.
Very
yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
No, welcome. Before we go into, the technical aspects of what you do, your research profiles, let's quickly touch on who you are as individuals, a bit of your personal and professional.
So I go first.
You can.
Yes. I started my career as an agricultural scientist, having went to the university to do agriculture. So as expected, I got a job with the government. I became an agricultural extension officer. Then I moved on to become a regulator or an inspector, plant health inspector. And then when I was there, I discovered that there's another interesting angle to agriculture. Having interacted with scientists who are involved in promotion of genetically modified technologies. And when I was at that space, I got interested into the different perspectives I could hear, those who are for the genetically modified technologies and those who are against. So that got me moving. And that's when I decided to pursue a PhD, trying to understand the different perspectives. Why would scientists speak differently about a technology, disagreeing or agreeing? So I decided to pursue a PhD on innovation and development in the UK. And I got a PhD on governance of technologies. Looking at the different perspectives that people get into on a particular, aspect, which is supposed to benefit the community. And this was genetic engineering. So I got back to Kenya, and I have continued to engage in this space as an innovation scholar. And this is where I am. Very interesting path, moving from an agriculturist to an innovation scholar, but honed to look at issues of communities from an innovation perspective. This is where I am.
Okay, thanks, Anne. And for you, Catherine?
Well, I guess our paths kind of are very different. I from when I was growing up, I was very interested in issues around environment. At that point, the concept of sustainability was not really something that we discussed, but I had a very keen interest on environmental management issues. So when I went to the university, I'm a social scientist, so I went to the University of Nairobi, trained in sociology and economics for my undergraduate. But at that point, I was really interested in the concept of development, especially in the African context. And why, the big question was, why is Africa underdeveloped at that point? So that created an interest in how you link development issues with issues of natural resource management. So when I went to do my master's, I pursued again social science master's, but looking at natural resource management as how it defines the context of where we are as a continent. And at that particular point, I actually did my thesis on the Green Belt movement in Kenya, looking at how the Green Belt movement really signified the state of where we were as a country in terms of our natural resource management issues, and how one woman can really took it up to herself to really make sure that sustainability became something that was going to define our trajectory in terms of the development pathway. And then serendipity happened. I got into a career where it was about research for development, and I naturally gravitated towards issues around the natural environment. But I got the opportunity to now get into food systems. So that's where my interest and I guess deepening of my research and career interest in agriculture started. So I went and did my PhD in the Netherlands. And at that point, I was now working within the agriculture extension program. So because agriculture extension then was a very important arm of how technology knowledge was generated from research and then brought to smallholder farmers, especially, or any other farmer. So there's always this understanding that there's a triangle where you have the scientist, then you have the extensionist, and then you have the farmer. So research generates the knowledge. The extensionists are supposed to extend it to the farmers.
Yeah.
But then at that point, there was already a discussion around, we have multiple knowledge systems. So research is not the purview of agriculture only or scientists, but there are many other ways in which knowledge is generated. And so at that point, I also got into innovation systems, looking at agriculture from an innovation systems perspective. And since then, I've been looking at agriculture innovation systems and looking at food systems transition in the context of climate change and all these challenges that we're facing in the sector.
Let me ask this question differently. If you were not doing what you're doing right now, what else would you be doing?
I think this is what I'd be doing, because I've gotten very, very interested in understanding what I call systemic factors that either enhance or impede, translation of good knowledge into transformative change. And this applies to not just the food systems, it also applies to other technologies, like for the Industrial Revolution and the numerous technological innovations that we actually engaging with within that space.
Yeah.
And the question that makes me pursue what I'm doing now is, when we have a technology, so what? Do we have the enabling environment or ecosystem to enhance translation of that particular knowledge that is coming out of these numerous initiatives into to use?
Yeah.
And that's why we agree with Catherine, because she's also motivated by seeing research and knowledge be put into use.
Catherine, I'm hoping you'll answer this question differently. Anne has run away.
Well, of course, we're complex people. We have many interests. So, I mean, if I look at myself when I was younger, maybe science was not my path. I had so many other interests. I actually was very sporty. I thought I was going to go into professional sports.
Yeah, which one?
Actually, in soccer.
Soccer.
I always thought that then, but I was ahead of my time. And so I've had other interests. I've been interested in music but I
didn't know that.
Science. I've gravitated to science and not science, but science that is offering real solutions to society. So
absolutely,
Catherine.
And actually, Anne, you've just mentioned fourth industrial revolution. I know on this podcast, we've talked a lot about AI. We've talked a lot about genetic modification. And actually, I'm also hoping that you'll unpack that a little bit. But maybe unpack fourth industrial revolution. What do we mean when we say those three words?
It's, to me, fourth industrial revolution is simply digitization and digitalization of manufacturing sector. spurring, manufacturing and applying digital, innovations. It can be any form of digital innovation to enhance the functionality of the manufacturing sector. Using digital innovation or digitization to spur, production, to spur, use. So we are speaking about using digital, economy or innovations to spur the production side on one hand and also the user side on the other hand. And when I talk about production, I mean, optimizing, how we do things to produce. If it is food, in this case, we are talking about food, but also trying to use digital, technologies to optimize, how the users apply, a knowledge or technologies. So we can talk about digitized, what we can call, methods of producing food, for instance, or digitized method of doing business like marketing, or digitized methods of applying technologies or information or data to maximize on productivity, whichever sector you are in. So for me, what makes fourth industrial revolution different from the other two revolutions is the digital, how digitization and digital technologies have been applied, maximally at this time in point, just to maximize and optimize what we do.
Yeah. If I ask you a question closer home to Kenya, what examples, maybe 3 examples, do we have in this country where we are using fourth industrial revolution? And maybe not even just using it. Are we creating it, or are we just consumers of 4IR?
We can actually go down to the space where everybody understands the use of mobile, use of mobile, or what we call, mobile technologies, for enhanced financial inclusion, for instance. M-Pesa, for me, it was just the beginning of engaging with fourth industrial revolution, because from that space, you can see even ordinary people actually optimize how they use, the mobile, technology, to actually maximize, output or engagement. For me, that is the simplest form of fourth industrial revolution in application in practice, going down to the local, stakeholder, any actor can actually engage with that. But then making it much more complicated, the application of, what we can call data analytics, to, enhance production and output, use of artificial intelligence, use of Internet of Things, machine learning. We have seen the application of robots, that are perceived to be coming in to displace, some basic tasks that we do. So basically, that's why the fourth industrial revolution is revolutionary in itself, because it comes to disrupt. So the technologies that are using digital applications, they are revolutionary and disruptive. To me, that is the simplest way I can explain fourth industrial revolution. But I want just to add in, to bring in now, to spice up why I am in that space. I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to ask, this particular space is very uncertain. You are hearing that it's likely to even displace jobs, for instance. So there's a lot of uncertainty in this particular space. And for me, I'm going to ask questions as an innovation scholar. So what? Or what are the conditions that we need to put in place in terms of policy, in terms of infrastructure, to optimize the use and the benefits of these revolutionary technologies by all? And that's where inclusivity comes in. We want to make sure everybody benefits from the applications of related to fourth industrial revolution. If it is machine learning, if it is Internet of Things, there are those numerous opportunities that we can actually, derive from the fourth industrial revolution in technologies. But what is the implication of that for so many stakeholders who are into that ecosystem? So there are those who are bound to benefit probably immediately. There are those who are about to, to be excluded in the process. There are those who are about to lose jobs.
Yeah.
So for me, the most important question for a policymaker or even an innovation scholar is to ask, so what? How can we govern? The governance aspect of fourth industrial revolution for me is very critical, to make sure that we are inclusive in what we do, to make sure that we come up with enabling policy environment to benefit everyone, and to make sure that the technologies in this space are not misused.
Yeah.
Because some of them can actually be misused, and that can actually be risky. So there are so many factors that we need to look at if we have to ensure that fourth industrial revolution is beneficial to the economies, number one, but also to the actors who are part of the complex and wide ecosystem that we are speaking to. That's how I would want to look at for the industrial revolution, not just the revolution itself, but what implication it can have, whether it is positive implication or negative implication.
Right.
Yeah.
And both of your were extension
background in extension
workers in the past. So Catherine, maybe, when I both met you, you were looking at actually a project that was, still in the 4IR, and it was on electric vehicles and gender inclusivity. And I wonder, to this point, moving slightly away from agriculture, but I don't know if we can move away from agriculture, because even with electric vehicles, you'll need them in the farmlands, I suppose. Catherine, do you want to expand a little bit about inclusion, the element of inclusion, sustainability, building resilient livelihoods?
Yeah, I think building, or just continuing from where Anne left, the issue of inclusion in relation to the fourth industrial revolution is very apparent in agriculture. I mean, when you look at our agriculture system, where we have majority smallholder farmers living in rural communities, where access to knowledge is very limited because of access to technologies such as cell phones, or we see the opportunity that this presents. So that traditional extension was, you had somebody who was hired by government who would walk around or travel around communities and just giving them advice on what they need to do. For many reasons. First, we don't have the manpower that is doing that. Government is no longer hiring as many extension workers as they used to. So we have, it used to be traditional, or what FAO recommended was you would have one extensionist for farmers. Right now, we're talking about 200 to 300 farmers for one extension. So there is no way humanly possible that extension workers, as we traditionally knew them, would be able to even go and provide that support to smallholder farmers the way we expect extension to do that. So digital technologies and digital platforms that offer knowledge and extension services have provided that opportunity to actually reach as many more farmers with the new knowledge, new advice, provide them with the advisory. But where we see the limitation is the access to that technology. So how many rural smallholder farmers can afford a smart farm? A smartphone, sorry. So although it is revolutionary as Anne has mentioned, but it is the issue of access that becomes a bit difficult. And we see it across the board in many ways. So like some of the work that I'm currently involved in on addressing the challenge of food loss that you had mentioned, where we see that the access gap to new technologies is still very big, is huge. So how do we put in place, whether it's mechanisms around enabling access to finance, because it's also an issue of access to finance. How do we also put in place measures around just the capacity to be able to even operate some of these things that I mean, you'll be surprised that operation of digital tools or a digital smartphone in a way that you can optimize it's the way it can provide you with knowledge. Like at the touch of a screen now, you can diagnose diseases of crops. At the touch of a screen, you can know where is your tomatoes selling for, and for where and for how much. But it is not the capacity to utilize these tools in a way that is optimal is still not there, especially with our rural smallholder farmers.
Okay.
So how do you embed capacity building? But how do you also embed systems that enable that access in ways that are affordable for them, because affordability is key. How do you also make sure that they have the knowledge to be able to use this knowledge to translate it into, say, how do I change how I do my farming? How do I change what seeds do I use? What pesticides or what inputs do I use? So access is very key, and that is where the word or the concept of inclusion becomes paramount. And it's the same thing like we're saying with technologies like electric vehicles. So as we see the transition that is offering huge opportunities in terms of a sustainable transport system in the country, including in rural communities, but we're still seeing these technologies still very much concentrated in urban areas. We're not seeing it percolating to rural communities. So the rural-urban gap still has to be addressed, and how we use some of this technology to really close that gap in ways that is very, we accelerate that closing of that gap of access to this technology and the knowledge that is needed to actually use these new technologies.
I wonder what both of you would respond very quickly to the issue of, if in the example of the electric vehicles, I know for both of you, you were looking at how do women, it's a new technology, but it seems that it's the men who are onboarding that and using it. So how do you encourage more women to become key players in the electric vehicle industry, whether as drivers, whether as mechanics? I think that's an interesting one to hear. But closely linked to that question on the farmers, and Catherine, you've mentioned that, sometimes in the presence of technology, you might lack know-how on how to maximize it. And it's not only for farmers, even us. I'm sure if somebody did an audit of the phones that we have, which we're calling smartphones, an ability to maximize on the gadget at hand. I'm sure we're all using it below par, maybe at 30%. So I can only imagine for a farmer. So what is it that, through acts, through the work that you're doing, what are the things that you're pushing or you're driving for at a policy and practice level to encourage, the involvement of different genders in the technological space, and then also the empowerment? I guess maybe even the question is threefold. It's the involvement of different genders, the empowerment to utilize existing technologies that will increase your socioeconomic, or uplift you. And then perhaps also, and my question has just disappeared. Let's tackle those two first.
So you want to go first?
Yeah. Well, I think the issue of capacity building or capacity strengthening, because we don't assume that people don't have the capacity, but you just need to strengthen it. Capacity strengthening becomes very critical. So when you're introducing some of this revolutionary technology, you have to also accompany it with the necessary capacity strengthening that is required for them, for people to be able to use it. So within ACT, capacity strengthening is very key and central to the work we do. So like I would give an example with the work we're doing with cold chain in smallholder farming systems. And we have seen over the years where cold chain has just been dropped in communities. And I guess people would assume, in most cases, it's, government programs, they would assume that the smallholder farmers will just figure it out and use it. And so we have examples of across the country where we have this technology that was deployed in so many communities, but it has now, it's just wasted because it's not being utilized. And so people have always been scratching their heads like, why? We've given them something that they can use. And so, we're learning more and more that you have to accompany technology with the necessary capacity strengthening approaches, with also unlocking other barriers that might make it difficult for people to use, whether it's, if it's cold storage, for example, do you have somebody within the community who has the technical know-how to even operate and maintain it? I mean, seems very simple, but it's not, because you need somebody who has a very good understanding of the technicalities of a cold storage to operate it, to maintain it, to know when it's not functioning. And so capacity strengthening should always accompany the deployment of these technologies that we're talking about. And the other thing, I think you have to really work around affordable financing, because one of the things that we're seeing with a lot of technologies, people are willing to acquire it or adopt it, But the way this technology is deployed and when it's introduced into communities, it's actually not affordable for them. So what are those things that policy can do to make affordability feasible? And then looking at how you work with financial institutions, for example, to come up with affordable products that are targeting in the case of smallholder farmers. So how do you target them with products that really are fit for purpose for the context that they are operating in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Anne, as you come in, maybe you want to touch on, I wonder if some of the approaches we introduce into communities, and this was my third question, are usually top down. So maybe even as researchers or as African scientists, maybe you find that in the involvement of smallholder farmers, we tend to push the technology, push the knowledge to them, and forget that these are also individuals with their own wealth and also historical know-how that we're not maybe onboarding. So I don't know, how do you marry the two, Anne?
Let me speak from the perspective of what we do as African Center for Technology Studies Acts. We adopt what we call systems approach. And of course, we add in innovation system approach. And that approach for us is transformational in that it encourages the stakeholders, all the actors who belong to that particular system. If it is agri-food systems, all the stakeholders who belong to that system. If it's e-mobility, all the actors that belong to that system. We want to encourage what we call joined up, activities, joined up, working together, making sure that we take stock of who are the actors within that ecosystem. If it is e-mobility ecosystem, if it is food system, if it is digital, all forms of innovation. We bring all those stakeholders together to have a conversation on what is this that they need to contribute to the functionality of that system.
Yeah.
So that's how then we can change the narrative from top down to down up or joined up. And that basically is what we are encouraging. And that means then we can take into consideration the role of indigenous knowledge or what we call local knowledge, which actually is very, very critical to a sustainable system, sustainable innovation system, because you take into consideration that which the users of that knowledge that is coming out of that, the context within which they operate, you incorporate it in designing strategies for capacity building, strategies for policy-oriented strategies that can benefit them, strategies for empowering them to gain the skills or reskill for this matter, to be able to participate maximally and in a way that they benefit from that system. So the system thinking for me adds value, but also rethinking what we mean by even innovation.
Yeah.
Because we use the concept of innovation in a very, very loose way.
Yeah.
But innovation is not just about a product. Because people know innovation as a product innovation. The mobile is a product.
It's a product, yeah.
But behind that product, or what we call product innovation, there's what we call process innovation. And when you talk about process innovation, then you take into consideration all the systemic factors that have to be looked into to enhance the uptake of that product innovation. There is the affordability that Catherine has talked about, the support in terms of financing. The support in terms of packaging that technology to be adaptable. Because the mama boga down there, really, she cannot use the smartphone. She will need a mobile phone that is usable for her needs. So adaptability comes with understanding the systemic factors that surround the deployment of that revolutionary, that technology which is revolutionary. So it goes back to what are the factors that we need to consider when we are formulating policy to enhance everybody, inclusivity in terms of uptake of those technologies so that they can benefit from them. Because at the end of the day, if we can increase the number of those who benefit from those technologies, then the economy also is its benefits.
You know,
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. And if you were to look at, we were talking about data and figures earlier, you know, and just quoting some data that with the agri-food sector in this country, it contributes more than 50% of our GDP and 60% of jobs are in agriculture.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you were to change things around, what are the 3 quick things, you know, guardrails you also want to put on the use or the introduction of innovations tech to 60% of our population that is contributing more than 50% to our GDP? And I think, Catherine, maybe you could also talk about the wastage because those figures were astounding.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just looking at some numbers saying we lose about 760 billion shillings in food waste annually. So, I mean, when you hear such numbers, they're staggering.
Yeah.
Because, you know, how do we survive in a country that is very dependent on agriculture? Like you said, it's the backbone of our economy.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of what we need to do really, and I think from a research perspective and science perspective, is how do we define agendas that are really targeted at the problems that we're facing, whether it's a country, whether it's a community, whether it's the region. And I mean, obviously there are many blueprints that have been developed in the country. You know, we can talk about Vision 2030, or we can talk about, you know, Africa 2063. So we have all these blueprints that have been put in place. But I think what has been lacking also is first support for research or science, technology, and innovation from those, whether it's at government level or at the continental level. We're still seeing very small percentages of GDP value that goes into research. So we depend hugely on external funding for supporting our research, which we think can solve the problems that we face in the continent, because we can define those problems based on the agendas of the continent or the country, and not bringing in external agendas.
Yeah.
And 2, I think we still need to build the capacity of systems, the innovation systems, to work collaboratively, because this is a collaborative effort. So science does its part, industry does its part, community does its part. So how do we make sure that we are building and supporting the growth of this innovation ecosystem or systems to be able to work very collectively and very in a very concerted manner to make sure that we're solving these problems? Because I think we talk about these problems too many times and we're not solving them fast enough. And they're catching up. Like now we're saying with the 4th industrial revolution, we're now catching up with 4th generation problems, issues, like whether it's ethics of AI, whether it's, you know, the capacity, on local capacity, like you said, are we users of this technology, or are we generators of this technology? So how do we make sure that we build that capacity, continually build that capacity of the human resource base to be able to apply these things and to be able to solve our problems and our challenges? So those are the areas where I think we need to continue putting effort in.
Right. And
maybe just to add, and yes, of course, the capacity is key to undertake research. But then, of course, then to use that particular evidence that is coming out of that research, it has to be contextualized research. Evidence that speak to the issues on the ground. That is what we call contextualized evidence.
Yeah.
And then, of course, making sure that the policymakers use that particular evidence to inform policies and strategies that are relevant. But also that contextualized evidence, it will bring out issues around, you know, what she's talking about here, ethics, governance, you know, those issues are very, very critical, and they are social issues.
Yeah.
And therefore, conceptualize innovation as a social process for us is very, very critical. And then that brings us to taking into consideration what many people don't take into consideration: social innovation, institutional innovation. We talk about product innovation, but we forget that there's much more beyond just the product. There is so much that is embedded within that particular process of innovation that brings about the social innovation aspect of the entire innovation process. The institutional, which speaks to reorganizing our organizations or our institutions to speak to the problems that we have. Because if one organization is speaking this way and another one is speaking in a disjointed way, that institutional innovation speaking to that particular issue for me, it is very, very critical to bring to that concerted focus of inclusive process that brings everybody along. And that has to be embedded in the policies, holistic policies that we are generating and formulating, and of course, implementation.
Yeah, it sounds like when you're thinking about an innovation, you have to almost consider a whole innovation ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's not just one aspect. It's
No.
like when you're building a car. You know, you imagine you're building the engine, but then suddenly you have the body parts, the seats on the inside.
That's true.
You know, the steering wheel. So it's a whole thing for the entire vehicle to move forward.
That is true.
And I think perhaps we never think about.
But you also
things
need
that way.
the marketers and all those people, financiers. So it's not just the car. It's also about the entire ecosystem that will be required for that car to benefit, to go to where it's supposed to be used and also be used. Yes, you buy the car by the farmer and then use it for what's supposed to be used for.
That's right. So as we are wrapping up, because time again is never, we never have enough time, like I say, when we're having fun. What would you like to see changed? If there's one thing, if you could, you know, if we could really put that magic wand out there, what is it that you would poof and it's changed for the better?
For me, I would want all the stakeholders in whichever ecosystem you're talking about. You know, you can approach sector, energy is becoming another thing, e-mobility, food systems. My urge is for everyone to behave like a system, not to behave disjointed.
Yeah.
And then if there are some strategies that are to be taken into consideration, like capacity strengthening, then it has to think about the entire ecosystem.
Yeah.
So if it is innovation, capacity strengthening, it has to consider the entire system approach. That for me would help us to move together, considering all the gaps for each of the stakeholder, whether it is the farmers, whether it is the policymakers, researchers, academic, private sector. Let's move together as a system.
And before I go to Catherine with the same question, what's one example? You know, sometimes we do paint a grim picture, and maybe it's because of the realities we live in of science and, you know, what's happening out there. What's one great example that you could say, and here's an example of amazing impact that has happened in the agriculture world or sector, involving technology, making sure farmers utilize it better? Is there an example you can speak to that for you, this is your, it's almost your pocket card, you're always pulling it out there?
A lot has happened with the small scale farmers. One thing that I've seen happening is empowering the communities, especially women. The target has been women, to empower them to participate in the production. In the production, you know, at the local level.
Yeah.
For me, that has really worked. And involving women, that has been very, you know, very much given attention, even by the fathers.
Yeah.
And a lot is happening, and we can see now women are able to basically, you know, participate in the agri-food systems in a systemic way.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne. Catherine?
What would I like to see changed?
Yeah. Where's your wand? Where's your wand going? In which direction?
Yeah, well, not to sound like a broken record and repeating what Anne said. Yeah, I think that collaboration and concerted effort to really have an agenda that we are following, and resources are then dedicated to those agendas, and not having an agenda, but then your resources are pointing to something else because you did not put agendas to really focus on that blueprint that you have. So I would want to see that even the way our financial and budgeting processes go in the country, that they are really dedicated to the problems that we're trying to solve and not putting them elsewhere. From our research perspective, we've been saying this a lot, that we want to see more money put into research funding.
Yeah.
I think that is an important way of just one area where we can see that, because we have seen change. We have seen when you do that and you dedicate effort and funding for these things, we see change. If you look at climate smart agriculture and the interventions and the technologies that have emerged out of that, we are seeing a lot of new whether it's crops or livestock that are more resistant or not resistant, but can adapt better to changes in climate. But we're also seeing the market responding with addressing issues of safe food, because science has given the evidence to say, okay, there's a problem with the safety of our food, and so we need interventions, and so using the evidence to guide how industry also operates. And I think we need to see that evidence being used and taken up by industry, because I think our food system requires a lot of concerted effort for us to ensure that everybody has access to safe and nutritious food. So we're feeding our people, and we're feeding them well, and we're feeding them safely.
Quick fire questions, and this is now the wrap up. Is what 3 scientists, like they don't have to be Kenyans, they can also be Africans, would you say you'd want to hear from as well, like yourselves, that we can host on this podcast also? Who are the 3
they don't have to be in Kenya.
They don't have to be Kenyan. Who inspire you?
Unfortunately, my preferences are not in Kenya.
They're not in Kenya. Are they Africans?
No, they're not. Actually, one of them is not African, but I really would. He can speak. Actually, he can speak to African issues.
Yeah.
Professor Rudval has been my mentor, actually, and I think he speaks to African contextual issues, and even supporting what we are doing. Actually, he's been supporting through the program. He's in Sweden.
Okay.
I mean, in Denmark. He's Swedish, but based in Denmark.
Yeah.
But he is somebody who I think has contributed so much into some of this thinking, which is theoretical, conceptual, and which I think is critical to speaking to changes using the context, or rather the evidence that we have in Africa.
Amazing.
He is Professor Rudval. I have a colleague of mine in Tanzania. She's called Dr. Bitrina Diomet. Together, we have been mentored by this professor, and she is also speaking to the same issues and bringing in the indigenous, the role of the indigenous knowledge and building local capacity to be able to use our own knowledge, which is generated locally, to inform our own issues.
Yeah,
I think that's the other person that I would want to certainly engage, bring to this conversation. That's a continuity of what we started.
Okay, I would say you for a third one, Catherine. 2 or 3.
Is it speaking to African context or issues only, or
anything? And it doesn't have to be in agriculture, by the way.
Oh, it doesn't have to be in agriculture.
Yeah.
With agriculture, I think, given the work that we're doing around food loss and waste, I think somebody who's really pushing the envelope and worth talking to is Professor Jane Ambuko of the University of Nairobi. I think she's really done a splendid job in putting food loss and waste on the agenda, and how the continent now is rallying behind some of this thinking. The other one, I mean, for me, in terms of some inspiring scientists, I don't know if she would speak to the issues of the continent, but I know Mariana Mazzucato. For me, I've always mentioned Mariana Mazzucato. She's based out University College of London.
Okay.
And her ideas around innovation and how the private sector and the public sector can really work together to really address things in a much more inclusive and fair way, because I think her argument has been that private sector has benefited from a lot from the investment coming from public sector, but we don't see the public sector benefiting as much as the private sector. So around issues around intellectual property and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think I find her very illuminating in terms of her position on that issue. The third person, I think I would want to see if you could find time also to talk to our executive director. He has some interesting ideas around
Professor Ogada.
Yeah, Professor Tom Ogada. Yes, around how where we should be putting our investment to really unlock the opportunities that there are with science in terms of really getting some of these solutions to the market and making things work for society. So I would say he's I think he has some interesting ideas that would be worth sharing in such a podcast. So.
No, and I'm sure we've taken note of that. And who knows? He might just be the next guest sitting where you're seated.
He'd be happy to do that.
I'm sure he would be happy.
Yeah.
So as we close, parting shots, what is your takeaway message or call to action?
This is the time, especially for if we are going to take advantage of the fourth industrial revolution. This is the time, not just for Kenya, but also for Africa, because the digitization and digital, we don't have to leapfrog. We already have the capacity, the know-how to actually apply digital technologies to benefit us as Kenyans, as Africans. And we don't have to borrow or to draw from the West or the North to see what they have done and what has worked for them. So actually, they can learn from us. The digital technologies, I don't think we need to learn from others. We have what it takes.
Yeah, thanks. And we're not late to the game?
No. We are not.
Things are moving very quickly.
No, certainly not.
Catherine?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll just say that in the context of this, what we're doing today, I think this is very useful, that we need to hear more stories from science. I think science is a bit mysterious for many people, or technology innovations. I think, getting these stories out to as many people as possible, for me, I think is an interesting way to tell what we do and the importance of the work that we do. So I think I just want to laud that this podcast, I think, should get out to as many people as possible, so that we have science as something that people interact with on a regular basis.
No, and thank you both for your time, your deep view and knowledge as well. This has been truly an eye-opening conversation with the two of you this afternoon. And that's a wrap on this episode of Connecting the Dots podcast. Please remember, an idea starts as a dot. It's what you do with it that changes the game. Stay curious, stay bold, and stay sane.